Hi there, and welcome to What on Earth are Derivatives, where we're going to learn how this fancy word, derivatives, is really pretty simple to understand. We're going to learn what derivatives are and how they work and the different types of derivatives that are out there. I'm Dan Rowan, Executive Director of Risk and Portfolio Management at KPI Capital, and without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So you've probably seen the price of oil or gold quoted on the news. Something like oil just hit $100 a barrel, or gold is at a new record high of $1,900. And to give those prices some context, people use charts like this one on the screen at the moment, which basically uses a picture to show how a price moves over time. Oil and gold are what they call commodities. Traders and investors buy and sell these commodities on the markets using things called futures contracts. Well, a futures contract is an example of a derivative. And there we go. We know our first derivative, a futures contract. So why is a futures contract on, say, oil a derivative? Well, it's because an oil futures contract derives its value from the price of oil. Similarly, gold futures derive their price from the price of gold. So the value of a gold futures contract is based on the price of gold. So a derivative is basically an asset that derives its value from the value of another asset, and that's where the word comes from. Derives, derivative. It's an agreement between two people, or a contract, that has a value. That is, the contract itself is worth more than the paper it's written on. So let's have a look at a simple example of how a derivatives contract might work. Let's say we have two people, Bob and Sally, and we'll say that Bob's interested in buying whatever it is that Sally's selling, and it really doesn't matter what that is, whether it's sheep or guitars or fridges, but we'll call it guitars because, well, just because I like guitars. Now, Bob's willing to give some money to Sally for the guitars that she sells. But Bob doesn't want to buy the guitars today, or he wants to buy them today, but he doesn't actually want to walk away with the guitars today. He wants Sally to deliver the guitars at some point in the future for some reason, say in 2 weeks' time, and Sally's okay with that. So instead of Sally giving Bob, for instance, 5 guitars, we'll say that Bob's starting a band, she gives him a contract for the delivery of those 5 guitars. So Bob gets the contract for his money. He pays for the contract that says that Sally will give him the 5 guitars in, say, 2 weeks' time. Remember, he's paid in full for those 5 guitars. But all he's got is the contract which binds or makes Sally deliver those 5 guitars in 2 weeks. Okay, so that contract is transferable. And this is where the value of a derivative becomes clear. By transferable, we mean that the people who made the original agreement, in this case Bob and Sally, can sell their side of the agreement or their rights to someone else. So let's continue the example. Let's say that Bob decides that he doesn't want to start a band anymore. There he is. Bob doesn't want to start a band anymore, and so he no longer wants the guitars that he ordered from Sally. So he approaches Terry, who perhaps collects guitars. Bob can sell the contract to buy the guitars to Terry at whatever price they agree on, which will obviously be driven by the market value or the going rate of those 5 guitars. If guitars are currently highly sought after, and I guess they should be, I mean, everyone wants a guitar, then the value of guitars has probably gone up since Bob and Sally made their agreement. And given guitars are now worth more in that scenario, Terry would probably be willing to pay more for this contract than Bob did. So Bob will have made some money on those guitars even though he never actually took possession of them. Of course, it can work the other way if the price of guitars had gone down for some reason, but the real key to remember here is that the contract itself has a value and can be bought and sold, and that is at the heart of what a derivative is. Now, unlike our example involving Bob and Sally and Terry, the sort of derivatives that we trade on the financial markets take a very particular form, or take particular forms. There are different types. The first example we'll look at is futures, which is one of the oldest forms of derivative traded today. Futures are standardized, regulated, and exchange traded. What that means is they're all the same, which is what they call standardized, and that means that, for instance, all gold contracts are for the same amount of gold. They're controlled by someone, a governing body, which is what they call regulated, and if you want to buy or sell them, you have to do that through a futures broker on a futures exchange, which is the place people buy and sell futures, and they call this exchange traded. So an oil futures contract represents a fixed amount of oil, and you can see the value of those oil contracts at the futures exchange, which is information you can access on a PC via the internet. Unlike Bob and Sally's agreement or Bob and Terry's agreement, you don't have to negotiate the value of a futures contract. The price is set by the market, and that price you can see at the exchange, and it's based on how many people want to buy, say, oil, and how many people want to sell oil. Now, we've talked a bit about these different assets, gold and oil and guitars. They're what's referred to as the underlying asset, and that's the asset which the derivative of the agreement or contract gets its value from. Now, common examples of underlying assets include commodities such as gold and oil that we've mentioned, but also corn and soybeans, equities, also known as stocks or shares, and foreign exchange, which is the trading of currencies, also sometimes called FX trading. I'm going to leave it there for part one of this presentation, but you can join me for part two, where we're going to look at another well-known derivative, options, as well as a few other items of interest. I'll see you there.